Sierra had spent 3 years on Prime learning to read the faces of their purple skin would shift to darker shades when they were angry and lighter when they felt joy. But she had never seen the High Priestess look the way she did now. The ancient leader stood before the great window of her throne room, watching the stars with an expression that Sierra could only describe as desperate hope. "You understand what we are asking," said without turning around. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of someone who had led her people for 200 years. Sierra nodded even though the priestess could not see her. "You want a marriage alliance with Earth, a symbolic union to strengthen our treaty." "Not symbolic," finally turned, and her golden eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. "The prophecy is very specific. A child of the death world must join with our sacred bloodline. Only then will the resonance awaken and save us from the darkness that comes." The darkness she spoke of was the Hollow Fleet. Sierra had seen the intelligence reports, a massive armada of ships that moved from system to system, consuming everything in their path. They had destroyed 1,000 civilizations over 10,000 years. Now they were coming for and nothing seemed capable of stopping them. "I will do it," Sierra said. The words left her mouth before she could think about them too deeply. She was a diplomat. Her job was to build bridges between species. If marrying a noble could save billions of lives, then she would make that sacrifice gladly. His expression shifted to something Sierra did not expect. It looked almost like pity. "You misunderstand, child. You will not marry the prophecy requires two beings from the death world. Two humans joined in our sacred temple, blessed by the resonance." Sierra felt confusion wash over her. "Then who am I marrying?" "We have searched your species for 3 years. We scanned genetic records from every human world and station. There is only one who matches what the prophecy requires." Pressed a button on her throne, and a holographic image appeared in the air between them. The man in the image was ordinary in every way Sierra could see. He had brown hair that was slightly too long and kind eyes that seemed tired. His file said his name was Daniel Cole. He was 32 years old and worked as an engineer on a mining station in the outer colonies. He had no military record, no political connections, and no special achievements listed anywhere in his history. Sierra could not hide her surprise. "What makes him special?" "That is what we intend to find out," replied. 3 days later, Daniel Cole arrived on Prime. Sierra watched him step off the transport ship and look around at the alien architecture with wide eyes. He wore simple clothes and carried a single bag over his shoulder. When the honor guard approached to escort him, he smiled at them nervously and said hello in broken that he had clearly learned on the journey. Sierra met him that evening in the garden outside the temple. The twin moons of Prime cast silver light across the strange flowers that grew there. Daniel was sitting on a bench, staring up at the unfamiliar stars. "Miss," he stood quickly when he noticed her approaching. I guess I should call you something else since we are getting married tomorrow, but I do not really know what." "Sierra is fine." She sat down on the bench and gestured for him to join her. "They told you what this is about." Daniel sat back down carefully, leaving a respectful distance between them. "They told me my genes matched something they were looking for. They said it could help save their people. They did not explain much more than that." He paused and looked at her with those tired, kind eyes. "I am sorry you got pulled into this. I know you probably had different plans for your life." Sierra had expected many things from this meeting. She had prepared herself for arrogance or ambition, or at least some curiosity about the power he supposedly possessed. She had not prepared for an apology. "Why did you agree to come?" she asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I grew up in a small town in Montana. My parents died when I was young. I worked hard and got an engineering degree, but I never felt like I belonged anywhere. I took the mining job because I thought maybe I would find something out there among the stars." He shrugged. "When they contacted me, they said I could help save billions of lives. How could I say no to that?" The wedding ceremony took place the next morning in the Temple of Resonance. The building was ancient beyond measure, built when they had first discovered the strange energy that powered their civilization. Now that energy was nearly gone, faded over countless generations until only traces remained. Sierra wore a simple white dress that they had provided. Daniel wore a formal suit that did not quite fit him properly. They stood before an altar made of crystal that had not glowed in 10,000 years. High Priestess spoke words in the old tongue. Sierra did not understand all of them, but she recognized the prayers for protection and hope. When the ceremony reached its peak, instructed them to join hands over the altar. Sierra reached out and took Daniel's hand. His palm was warm and calloused from years of working with machines. The crystal altar began to glow. The light started as a faint shimmer but grew brighter with each passing second. Soon, the entire temple was filled with brilliant white light that seemed to pour from the altar and wash over everything it touched. The witnesses fell to their knees. Some of them were crying. Sierra looked at Daniel and saw that he was just as shocked as everyone else. He stared at their joined hands and the light flowing around them with an expression of pure confusion. The glow faded slowly, leaving behind a warmth that Sierra could still feel in her chest. The temple fell silent except for the sound of breathing. An elderly priest approached and whispered something in her ear. Sierra was close enough to hear the words. "The resonance has chosen, but does he know what he is?" Looked at Daniel with that expression of desperate hope once more, and Sierra realized that her new husband might be something far more important than either of them had ever imagined. 3 months passed on Prime, and Sierra found herself settling into a life she had never expected. She and Daniel shared a suite of rooms in the royal palace, though they slept in separate chambers. Their marriage was political, and neither of them pretended otherwise. But somewhere along the way, they had become friends. Daniel spent his mornings learning the language from an elderly teacher named. He had a gift for it, picking up the complex sounds and grammar faster than any human Sierra had seen before. The palace servants adored him because he always thanked them and remembered their names. He would stop to help carry heavy loads or fix broken equipment without being asked. Sierra watched him more closely than she wanted to admit. She told herself it was because of the prophecy and the mystery of what he might be, but the truth was simpler than that. Daniel Cole was a genuinely good person, and in her years of diplomatic work, she had learned how rare that was. The strange incident started small. A power generator in the palace basement had been failing for weeks, and the engineers could not figure out why. Daniel offered to take a look at it because he missed working with his hands. He spent an afternoon in the basement, and when he came back up, the generator was running better than it had in years. The engineers could not explain what he had done differently. Then there were the plants. The garden outside their suite had been struggling in the unusual cold that had gripped the capital city. Sierra noticed Daniel sitting among the flowers one evening, just touching the leaves gently and looking peaceful. The next morning, every plant in the garden was blooming as if it were the height of summer. The most striking incident involved a child. The daughter of a palace guard had fallen ill with a fever that the doctors could not break. Daniel heard about it and asked if he could visit her. He sat beside her bed for an hour, holding her small hand and telling her stories about Earth. By morning, her fever was gone and she was asking for breakfast. Sierra confronted him about these events one evening as they sat together in their shared living room. The generator, the garden, that little girl, how do you explain all of that? Daniel looked uncomfortable. He always looked uncomfortable when attention was directed at him. Coincidence, I think. The generator probably just needed someone to look at it with fresh eyes. Plants bloom when they bloom, and children recover from fevers all the time. Daniel, Sierra leaned forward. The resonance lit up for you. The belief you might be the one to save them. Do you really think all of this is just coincidence? He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I have felt something my whole life, a kind of humming beneath my skin, like there is energy inside me that does not have anywhere to go. I learned to ignore it because thinking about it too much made me feel crazy. Before Sierra could respond, an alarm began to sound throughout the palace. Red lights flashed in the corridors outside their door. They rushed to the command center and found it in chaos. Admiral stood before a massive holographic display showing the star system. His blue skin had gone pale and his voice was tight with controlled fear. The Hollow Fleet has arrived. Scout ships in the outer system. Our long-range sensors count at least 40 vessels. High Priestess arrived moments later. She looked at the display and then at Daniel. The prophecy speaks of this moment. The darkness comes and the resonance must answer. Daniel shook his head. I do not know what you want me to do. I am just an engineer. I fix things. I cannot fight a war. Perhaps not, said gently, but wars are not always won by fighting. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation grew worse. The Hollow Fleet moved slowly inward, destroying outposts and patrol ships with terrifying efficiency. The military did everything they could, but their weapons seemed weak against the enemy vessels. Ancient defense platforms orbited Prime, but they had been dormant for 10,000 years. No one knew how to activate them anymore. One night called Sira to a private meeting. The high priestess looked older than she had before, as if the weight of her people's fate was crushing her. "I must tell you the full truth about the prophecy," said. "The resonance is not magic. It is a form of energy that exists throughout the universe. Long ago, my people could channel it freely. We built wonders with it, but over time, the ability faded from our species. We do not know why. And you think Daniel can channel it? The prophecy speaks of beings from death worlds. Your planet Earth is harsh by galactic standards. Your gravity is strong. Your predators are deadly. Your diseases are countless. Your species has survived things that would have destroyed others." Paused. "We believe that surviving on such a world changed humanity at a fundamental level. You evolved something that allows you to touch the resonance in ways we no longer can." Sira returned to their suite and found Daniel standing on the balcony. He was watching the sky where flashes of light marked distant battles between ships and hollow fleet scouts. "They are dying up there," he said quietly, "fighting to buy time, and I am standing here doing nothing." Sira stood beside him. "Do you feel anything when you watch this?" Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to look at her, and Sira saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before. Behind the kindness and the weariness, there was something ancient and powerful stirring to life. "I feel everything," he whispered, "and I think I am starting to understand what that means." As if in answer, the first Hollow Fleet dreadnought appeared in the upper atmosphere, descending toward the capital city like a dark omen of destruction to come. The Hollow Fleet attacked at dawn. Sira woke to the sound of explosions in the distance and the palace shaking around her. She rushed to find Daniel and discovered he had already left for the command center. The scene there was pure chaos. Officers shouted orders while holographic displays showed dozens of enemy ships pouring into the system. The orbital defense platforms hung in space like dead metal, unable to respond to the threat they were built to fight. Interceptor squadrons launched to meet the enemy, but they were outnumbered and Admiral stood at the center of it all, his voice calm despite the disaster unfolding around him. "Evacuate the civilian sectors, all non-essential personnel to the deep shelters. We will hold them as long as we can." Daniel stood near the main command console, watching the battle unfold. His face was pale but determined. Sira grabbed his arm and tried to pull him toward the exit. "We need to get to the bunker," she said urgently. "No," Daniel did not move. "I need to stay, I need to see this." Admiral glanced at him with barely hidden frustration. "With respect, your presence here serves no tactical purpose. The High Priestess values you, but this is a military operation." "I understand," Daniel said quietly, "but I am not leaving." Something in his voice made the Admiral pause. After a moment, nodded and turned back to coordinating the defense. Sira was escorted to the bunker with the other diplomatic staff, but she refused to go inside. She stood at the entrance, watching the sky through a reinforced window. Fires burned across the city where enemy weapons had found their targets. Ships fell from the sky trailing smoke and flame. In the command center, the situation grew desperate. A massive Hollow Fleet dreadnought had broken through the defensive line. It was 3 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that were charging to fire on the capital city. Interceptors swarmed around it like insects, but their weapons barely scratched its armor. "All remaining ships focus fire on the dreadnought," ordered. "We cannot let it reach the city." "Admiral, our weapons are not powerful enough," one of his officers reported. "At current damage rates, we would need 40 minutes to bring down its shields. It will reach firing position in 6. Closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them again, they held the acceptance of a man who knew he was about to die. "Continue firing. We do not surrender." Daniel watched the dreadnought descending on the display. He could feel something building inside him, a pressure that had been growing for months. The humming beneath his skin had become a roar. The resonance was calling to him, and for the first time in his life, he did not push it away. He walked forward and placed his hand on the main command console. The lights flickered. Every screen in the command center went dark for a heartbeat. Then they came back brighter than before, displaying readings that made no sense to anyone watching. Deep beneath Prime, ancient machines that had slept for 10,000 years began to wake. Power surged through conduits that had been cold and empty since before humanity had discovered fire. The orbital defense platforms, massive structures that they had long ago given up on, hummed with energy for the first time in. Admiral stared at his displays in disbelief. What is happening? Daniel did not answer. His eyes had closed and his face was tight with concentration. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His hand on the console glowed with faint white light. The defense platforms opened fire. Beams of brilliant energy lanced across space and struck the dreadnought with devastating force. Its shields, which had shrugged off everything the fleet could throw at them, collapsed in seconds. The next volley cut through the ship itself, splitting it in half. The two pieces tumbled away from each other, burning as they fell. The hollow fleet formation broke apart in confusion. Ships that had been advancing with confident aggression suddenly found themselves under attack from weapons they could not match. The platforms fired again and again, each shot precise and lethal. Within minutes, the enemy fleet was in full retreat, jumping to faster than light speed to escape the slaughter. Daniel collapsed. Sierra burst into the command center moments later, having run all the way from the bunker entrance. She found Daniel lying on the floor, unconscious but breathing. The officers stood around him in stunned silence. Admiral had fallen to his knees, his expression one of pure awe. High Priestess arrived and knelt beside Daniel's still form. She took his hand gently and bowed her head. Sierra had never seen a leader show such respect to anyone. "The prophecy is fulfilled," whispered. "The resonance has found its champion." They carried Daniel to the medical ward. Sierra stayed beside him through the night, watching his chest rise and fall with each breath. The doctors said he was simply exhausted, as if he had run 1,000 miles or lifted a mountain. His body needed rest to recover from what it had done. He woke the next morning with Sierra holding his hand. He blinked at the ceiling for a moment, then turned to look at her with confusion in his eyes. "What happened?" His voice was rough from disuse. Sierra told him everything: the defense platforms, the dreadnought, the retreat of the Hollow Fleet. She watched his face as she spoke and saw the disbelief grow with each word. "I did that." He looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I do not remember any of it. I just remember feeling like I had to do something, and then everything went white." "You saved millions of lives, Daniel. You saved an entire civilization." He shook his head slowly. "I do not understand what I am. How can I be something like this? I am nobody special. I fix machines and tell bad jokes. I am not a hero from a prophecy." Sierra squeezed his hand tightly. "Maybe that is exactly why the resonance chose you, because you never wanted power. You never asked for any of this. You are just a good man who wanted to help." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since he woke. "What am I?" Sierra looked into his tired, kind eyes and gave him the only answer she could think of. "I think you are what humanity was always meant to become." Word of what happened on Prime spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within days, every species in the galactic community knew the story of the human who had awakened ancient technology and driven back the Hollow Fleet single-handedly. Some called Daniel a savior. Others called him a weapon. Many called him a threat. The Galactic Council summoned him to appear before their assembly. The council was made up of representatives from 30 different species, and they gathered on a massive station at the center of known space. Sierra accompanied Daniel as his diplomatic advisor, though she knew her true role was to protect him from politicians who saw him as a prize to be claimed. The council chamber was enormous, with seats rising in circles around a central platform where Daniel stood alone. Sierra watched from the observation gallery, her hands clenched tight with worry. The representative spoke first. His species resembled tall insects with gleaming black shells. "The human called Daniel Cole possesses a power that could threaten the stability of the entire galactic community. We demand that he be turned over to a neutral scientific body for examination and containment." The ambassador, a being made of living crystal, agreed. "Such power cannot be allowed to remain in the control of a single species. Humanity is young and volatile. They cannot be trusted with this responsibility." Daniel listened to their arguments without expression. Sierra could see the tension in his shoulders, but he kept his voice calm when he finally spoke. "I understand your concerns. I have the same concerns myself. I did not ask for this power, and I am still learning what it means." He paused and looked around the chamber at the dozens of alien faces watching him. "But I am not a weapon to be studied or a tool to be controlled. I am a person, and I will not allow myself to be locked away in a laboratory because my existence makes you uncomfortable." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several representatives demanded that humanity be sanctioned until they surrendered Daniel. Others argued that they should be punished for creating this situation with their prophecy and their rituals. Through it all, Daniel stood quietly on the platform, waiting for the noise to die down. When it finally did, he spoke again. "The Hollow Fleet is still out there. They retreated, but they will come back. And when they do, they will not just threaten they will threaten everyone." He looked directly at the representative. "When that day comes, you will want me standing between them and your people, not locked in a cell somewhere." The council session ended without resolution. Daniel and Sira returned to Prime under heavy guard, but the political pressure continued. Earth's government was divided on how to handle the situation. Some officials sent messages urging Daniel to cooperate with the council. Others wanted him to return to Earth immediately so they could study him themselves. Daniel ignored all of them. He had more pressing concerns. The resonance was no longer something he could ignore or push away. He felt it constantly now, a current of energy flowing through his body and connecting him to everything around him. When he was calm, he could sense the life of every person in the palace. When he was upset, strange things happened. Lights flickered. Equipment malfunctioned. During one particularly tense diplomatic call, every screen in the room shattered at once. "I cannot control it," Daniel confessed to Sira one night. They were sitting in their shared living room, and exhaustion was written across his face. "It responds to my emotions, but I do not know how to direct it. What if I hurt someone by accident?" Sira moved closer to him on the couch. "Then we figure it out together. High Priestess has been gathering every record about the resonance that still exists. Maybe something in there will help. And if it does not, then we keep trying." She took his hand, and this time it felt natural rather than strange. "You are not alone in this, Daniel. You have me." He looked at her with those kind, tired eyes, and something passed between them that neither was ready to name. The crisis came 3 days later. A faction of conservative priests led by Elder had been speaking against Daniel since his awakening. They believed the prophecy had been misinterpreted and that no human should wield the sacred power of the resonance. Sira had been monitoring their activities, growing increasingly worried about their rhetoric. She discovered the truth by accident. A communication intercept showed Elder making contact with the Hollow Fleet. He was offering to reveal Daniel's location and the weaknesses of the defense network. In exchange, the Hollow Fleet would spare the when they returned and allow to lead what remained of his people. Sira confronted in his private chambers. The elderly priest did not deny what he had done. "That human is an abomination," hissed. "The resonance belongs to us. It is our birthright, not something to be handed to primitive apes from a death world. You would doom your own people to slavery just to spite one man." His eyes blazed with fanatical hatred. "I would doom them to preserve our dignity. Better to serve the Hollow Fleet than to be saved by a human." He moved faster than Sira expected for someone his age. His hand closed around her throat, and he slammed her against the wall. She tried to cry out, but his grip was too tight. Across the palace, Daniel felt something like a spike of ice through his heart. He knew instantly that Sira was in danger. The resonance guided him like a compass, and he ran through corridors and upstairs until he burst through the door of his chambers. The elder priest turned, still holding Sira by the throat. "You dare to enter here." Daniel raised his hand and flew backward as if struck by an invisible force. He released Sira and crashed against the far wall, pinned there by pressure that seemed to come from the air itself. Sira collapsed, gasping for breath. Daniel went to her immediately, helping her up and checking that she was all right. Only when he was certain she was safe did he turn back to. The priest struggled against the force holding him, his face twisted with fear and rage. "Kill me then. Prove what you really are." Daniel walked slowly toward him. The room hummed with energy, and the walls seemed to vibrate with barely contained power. For a long moment, he simply looked at the creature who had tried to kill his wife and betray an entire civilization. Then he released him. Fell to the floor, gasping. He looked up at Daniel with confusion. "Why?" "Because you are not worth becoming a monster over." Daniel turned away. "Guards will be here soon. You will face justice for your treason, but it will be justice, not vengeance." High Priestess arrived with her guards shortly after. She listened to Sierra's account of what happened and looked at Daniel with something new in her golden eyes. It was not just hope anymore. It was respect. "You had every right to end him," said. "He would have killed someone you love and destroyed everything we have fought for." Daniel shook his head. "Having power is not the same as having the right to use it. If I start killing everyone who opposes me, I become exactly what your enemies fear." Bowed her head. The prophecy spoke of a protector. I believe now that it was not speaking of your power over the resonance. It was speaking of your power over yourself. That night the long-range sensors detected the Hollow fleet returning. This time, they were not sending scouts. Every ship in their armada was coming. Hundreds of vessels darkened the stars above Prime. Daniel stood at the highest point of the temple, looking up at the approaching doom. Sierra stood beside him, her hand in his. "Are you ready?" she asked. Daniel smiled, and for the first time since she had known him there was no weariness in it, only certainty. "I think I finally am." The Hollow fleet filled the sky above Prime like a swarm of locusts descending on a harvest field. 300 ships of various sizes hung in orbit, their weapons charged and ready. The largest among them was a command vessel, so massive it blocked out the sun as it passed overhead. A transmission came from the command vessel, broadcast on all frequencies so that every being on the planet could hear it. The voice that spoke was cold and empty, like wind blowing through dead trees. "I am the silence. I speak for the Hollow fleet. We have consumed 1,000 civilizations, and we will consume 1,000 more. Your resistance has been noted and will be punished. Surrender the one called Daniel Cole, and we will make your end quick. Refuse, and we will make it last for generations." High Priestess looked at Daniel. The command center was quiet as everyone waited for his response. "May I reply?" Daniel asked. Nodded and activated the communication system. Daniel stepped forward and spoke in a voice that carried none of the fear that the silence clearly expected. "My name is Daniel Cole. I am the one you are looking for. I am asking you to leave. Not threatening, just asking. Because if you stay, I will have to stop you, and I do not want to hurt anyone." There was silence for a long moment. Then the silence laughed. It was an awful sound, like bones rattling together. "You are either very brave or very stupid human, perhaps both. No matter, your world dies today." The Hollow fleet opened fire. Beams of dark energy lanced down from orbit, targeting the capital city and the defense installations around it. The shields held for the first volley but began to flicker under the sustained assault. Alarms screamed throughout the command center as damage reports flooded in. Daniel turned to Sierra. "I need to get to the orbital platform, the one where the resonance network is strongest." "I am coming with you," Sierra said immediately. He started to argue, but she cut him off. "We do this together or not at all. That was the deal." Daniel nodded, and together they ran for the transport bay. The journey to the orbital platform took 12 minutes. They flew through a battlefield where ships fought desperately against Hollow fleet attackers. Several enemy vessels tried to intercept their transport, but Daniel raised his hand and they veered away as if struck by an invisible wall. The orbital platform was ancient, built when they were still masters of the resonance. Its halls were dark and dusty, but as Daniel walked through them, lights flickered on one by one. The station was waking up to greet him. They reached the central chamber, a massive room dominated by a crystal structure that pulsed with faint light. Daniel approached it slowly, and the light grew brighter with each step he took. "This is it," he said quietly. "The heart of the network. Every defense platform, every weapon, every system is connected through this crystal." "What do you need to do?" Daniel placed both hands on the crystal surface. "I need to let go, stop fighting what I am, and let the resonance flow through me completely." The crystal blazed with light. Energy surged through Daniel's body, and he gasped as power beyond anything he had felt before filled every part of his being. For a moment, he was connected to everything, to the planet below and the stars above and the vast emptiness between them. He felt the life of every on the surface and the cold hunger of the Hollow fleet in orbit. And he understood. The Hollow fleet was not evil. They were infected. Something ancient and parasitic had taken hold of their species ago, driving them to consume other civilizations in an endless hunger that could never be satisfied. The beings inside those ships were prisoners in their own bodies, forced to destroy because they could not stop. Daniel reached out with the resonance, not as a weapon but as a surgeon's tool. He found the parasite's presence in every hollow fleet vessel and began to separate it from its hosts. It was delicate work, like removing thorns from living flesh without causing more damage. The hollow fleet stopped firing. Ships that had been attacking with coordinated precision began to drift. Some collided with each other. Others simply hung in space, motionless. The dark energy that had powered their weapons faded as the parasitic influence was stripped away. In the command vessel, the being called the Silence felt something it had not experienced in 10,000 years. Clarity. It remembered who it had been before the infection, remembered a species that had explored the stars with curiosity rather than hunger. It remembered friends and family and joy. The Silence wept. Daniel his consciousness from the network and nearly collapsed. Sira caught him and held him upright as the crystal's light faded to a gentle glow. "Is it over?" she asked. "The parasite is gone, they are free." Daniel's voice was weak but filled with wonder. They did not want to hurt anyone, they were just sick, and now they are healed. The Hollow Fleet commander, no longer called the Silence, requested to speak with Daniel directly. The being that appeared on the was pale and thin, with large eyes that glistened with tears. "You could have destroyed us," it said. "You had the power to wipe us from existence. Why did you save us instead?" Daniel smiled tiredly. "Because destroying you would have been easy, saving you was harder, and the hard choice is usually the right one." The former Hollow Fleet departed Prime not as conquerors but as pilgrims seeking redemption. They had 1,000 civilizations to apologize to, 1,000 worlds to help rebuild. It would take generations, but they were committed to trying. In the weeks that followed, representatives from across the galaxy came to Prime. They came to see Daniel, to thank him, to offer alliances and treaties. The Galactic Council formally apologized for their earlier hostility and offered humanity a permanent seat among their members. Daniel refused every title and honor they tried to give him. He did not want to be a leader or a symbol. He just wanted to go home and rest. Home had become the suite of rooms he shared with Sira in the palace. That was where he felt most at peace. That was where he belonged. Months later, they stood on a balcony overlooking a celebration in the palace square. Representatives from a dozen species had gathered to mark the beginning of a new era of peace. Music played, and beings of every shape and color danced together beneath the moons. Daniel looked uncomfortable with all the attention. Sira took his hand and smiled at him. "You know, when I agreed to this marriage, I thought I was sacrificing myself for politics." Daniel turned to her, his eyes warm with the love that had grown between them. "And now? Now I think I got the better end of the deal." He laughed, and the sound carried across the square, mixing with the music and the voices of a galaxy that had learned to hope again. Down below, a human child and a child chased each other through the crowd, their laughter bright and innocent. Sira leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder and watched the celebration. She thought about how much had changed since that first awkward meeting in the temple garden. She had married a stranger to protect her people. She had watched that stranger become something extraordinary. And somewhere along the way, she had fallen in love with the quiet engineer from Montana who had shown the universe that true power lies not in destruction, but in compassion. The stars above them seemed brighter than they had in a long time. The darkness had been pushed back, and humanity, the species from the death world, had proven that they were worthy of their place among the stars. Not because they were stronger or more advanced, but because when given the choice between vengeance and mercy, they chose to heal rather than destroy. That was the legacy Daniel Cole left behind. That was the story that would be told for generations to come. The human who could have been a god but chose instead to simply be good. And that in the end was enough.